Moving on to some, frankly, rather disturbing news, ladies and gentlemen. A friend of the show, the Reverend Billy Talen, Reverend Billy who's been on the show a couple of times, Reverend Billy who is, of course, the head of the Church of Stop Shopping, who is an amazing performer, an amazing activist, someone who I personally admire a great deal. I mean, he's done some amazing, hysterical stuff over the years. Well, so about a month ago, ladies and gentlemen, the Reverend Billy was arrested. Now, if you know who the Reverend Billy is, you might just kind of shrug your shoulders and saying, what, Reverend Billy was arrested? That's kind of normal. He himself has claimed to be arrested around 75 times in his life, so it's not something abnormal for Reverend Billy to be arrested. You know, he's an activist who's been arrested, dozens and dozens of times for his heavily theatrical protests, for his civil disobedience. I mean, look, the truth is, Reverend Billy does put his body on the line out there for causes that he believes in all the time. He does that all the time. That's what he does. It's even more amazing the way he does it in such a hysterical and theatrical way, most of the time unbelievably funny ways when he's making a really, really good point. Well, so most of the time when Reverend Billy is arrested, what he gets is essentially a parking ticket. Maybe he spends one night in jail down in the Tombs of New York City. Maybe he gets some community service cleaning up a park or something like that. But that's actually not what's happening now, folks. So about a month ago, Reverend Billy went to a Chase branch in Manhattan with about a dozen or so activists who were dressed as toads. Why were they dressed as toads? Well, I'll get to that. They're actually playing these giant golden toads that have been extinct, that are now extinct due to climate change. What they had were these giant kind of paper mache golden toad hats. They're actually really, really neat they're really cool and really well done hats. I mean, I know people who do paper mache stuff. It's actually a lot of hard work to shape these things. And so you had these like dozen activists with these giant toad hats on. They were really pretty cool looking. So why were they protesting at Chase? I mean, there's lots of reasons to protest at Chase, but why would a group of people with giant toad hats protest at a Chase branch? Well, reading from the change.org petition protesting Reverend Billy's arrest, reading from the petition, quote, Chase Bank is a top financier of extractive fossil projects, responsible for more CO2 emissions release than any other institution, with the possible exception of the Chinese Communist Party. End quote. So look, folks, here's the deal. A lot of people don't think of Chase when they're thinking about climate change. They don't. You think about Exxon, you think about BP, you think about TransCanada, all those horrible countries. Companies which run countries. Let's be honest, these companies run countries. They run our country, but they're companies, at least for now. But so you think of those companies, right? But they followed the money. Reverend Billy and his activists followed the money, and the truth is that Chase finances a good deal of the actual extractions which lead to all the CO2 in our environment. So the Reverend Billy and his friends, who were dressed up as extinct toads with giant foam toad hats on, they went to Chase and they protested. They sang a song. The Reverend Billy delivered one of his sermons, and then they left. They left. They got up and they left. That's what happened. They did their protest. They sang their song. Reverend Billy preached, and then they left. They left Chase. So right after that, immediately following that, while the Reverend Billy was waiting on a subway platform for a train to come, he and his choir director were arrested. So here is what the Reverend Billy and his choir director were charged with. They were charged with riot in the second degree. That's right, you heard me, riot. They were charged with menacing in the third degree. They were charged with unlawful assembly and disorderly conduct. So here's where it gets a little tricky. So the unlawful assembly and disorderly conduct are low-level misdemeanors that really don't apply to much of anything here. However, the riot and the menacing charge carry a possible penalty of up to a year in jail. That's right. A year in jail for a political protest. All right, let's just get to the thick of this here. For starters, a dozen people in giant foam toad hats and a guy dressed as a reverend in an all-white suit who's preaching about the dangers of climate change. That, my friends, is not a riot. People in toad hats and people singing songs are not rioters. They are not menacing. If you saw the pictures, they are very clearly not menacing. They're wearing giant foam toad hats, for the love of God. They're people in toad hats. It's funny, it's eye-catching, it's theatrical, but is it a riot? Of course it's not a riot. Is it a menace? Of course it's not a menace. I mean, it's a disruptive, but that's what a political protest is going to be. Menacing and protesting are two different things here. So but what we're seeing here, and what we see again and again and again, is the criminalization of protest, the criminalization of speech, the criminalization of dissent. And it is a very, very, very dangerous and slippery slope we're on here. It is very dangerous, and we should be very, very worried about criminalizing speech in a supposed democracy, which is what we're supposed to have here in the United States of America. So right now, folks, there is a petition to the district attorney of New York, who leveled these absurd charges of riot and menacing against Reverend Billy and his choir director. And we will link to it on our website, which is matthewf.net. Again, matthewf.net. You can find the petition and sign it to have these ridiculous charges against Billy and his choir director dropped. Do take a second. Do me a favor. Take a second to sign it. Because the truth is, again, like I was saying, the Reverend Billy is a very, very dedicated activist. He also happens to be a very, very funny person who is using humor and theatricality to do what he can, all he can, to try to wake the world up to the real impending climate disaster that is literally bearing down upon us as I speak right now. The climate crisis is real. The climate crisis is happening, and Reverend Billy is doing what he can to try to draw attention to it by using, his power of speech and giant foam toad hats. And again, like I said, the Reverend Billy is someone whose activism I really, really, really admire. He does not deserve to be in jail at all, much less for the possibility of a year. Especially considering the fact that someone named Jamie Dimon, who is the head of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon and other Chase executives have still not paid for their part in the 2008 financial collapse, which ruined millions of lives, which cost people their homes, which caused people to die, all that kind of stuff. Jamie Dimon is not in prison. They didn't pay for that. They didn't go to jail for that. And they're not paying for their ecological crimes that they are committing right now against every living creature on this planet. If Jamie Dimon is not in jail, there is no way in hell that Reverend Billy should be in jail. And we need to do everything we possibly can to try to stop that from happening. We'll be right back.